So yes, as we said, this particular talk is kind of on the cloud operating model and some of the aspects kind of around that as well. So it'll be kind of focusing on a number of things that organizations really need to keep in mind when sort of looking at designing their cloud environment and really moving forward with sort of their cloud ambitions. So we've kind of done the intros, and yeah, just kind of quick background on myself. So I've been really in IT for much longer than I'd like to probably remember. I'm focusing probably the last 10 years or so sort of on cloud technologies and cloud native advocate. I've done roles like solution architect, consultant, pre-sales, systems engineering, and so on. Also do a lot of conference speaking, do vlogging. So I have a YouTube channel as well, which I do lots of talks about cloud native, and got some more coming out later on this year as well. Yeah, worked for the likes of IBM, SUSE, Mirantis, and most recently Worldwide Technology. At the moment, I'm a co-founder and CTO for Multi-Cloud Global, which is a cloud native consultancy. Again, website available on that. Okay, so in terms of the agenda, I thought we'll kind of start really with a quick update on sort of the state of play in cloud, maybe just kind of review some statistics, and then actually look at sort of the migration journey for organizations and what the kind of some of the landing zones, so to speak, in cloud that enterprises can actually go through. And then we'll kind of look at the cloud operating model, really just focus on into a couple of areas of that, and what does that actually mean, and how should organizations really go about sort of designing their their cloud environment and implementing a cloud operating model. We'll also look at cloud native and the role of cloud native in that space. So what does cloud native actually mean? What does it entail? What should organizations do to actually achieve cloud nativity in terms of the applications that they're and services that they're actually provisioning in their cloud environments. And then very quickly, kind of what would be the first step, or what would be one of the first steps? And this is probably a argumentative area, so certainly lots of debates around kind of where you should start and things like that. And we'll maybe just look at an option there. And hopefully, yes, we'll give an opportunity to do a bit of Q&A towards the end as well. Okay, so cloud state of play. Not going to dwell on this too much. Kind of just a few stats, really, just kind of get things going. So public cloud was actually worth well over $200 billion in tail end of 2019, according to IDC. In fact, that number actually, and I didn't include all the details of it, was actually much larger than all of the major traditional IT vendors, so the likes of IBM, HPE, Dell, etc. That figure was actually bigger than all of their revenues combined. Decisions in IT seem to be really kind of following the kind of the expected route, really an expected path in terms of what IT decision makers are looking at. So over 50% of them are looking at a hybrid cloud strategy. That's good. That means they're actually trying to utilize what they have in their data center, sweating those assets, but also moving forward into the public cloud. Interestingly, though, that over 60%, or nearly 60% rather, of clients don't actually make a decision until very late, sort of in the in the process, in terms of actually engaging with with the sales aspect of a organization, of an IT vendor. So that's an interesting statistic from Gartner. And then beyond that, digital transformation seems to continue, and really the journey for that has not been slowed down by COVID. So again, according to Google, 75% of organizations have continued their digital transformation journey despite the recent issues of the pandemic. Again, one of the areas of focus is containers and orchestration. So we've seen a lot of statistics. I won't go through all the details here. And again, more information from Gartner in terms of how organizations are actually adopting containers and containerizing their workloads. But really, the highest sort of priority for CIOs seems to be jumping onto the Kubernetes sort of bandwagon and actually being able to utilize orchestration using Kubernetes, as that seems to be the major sort of aspect of how you herd all of your containerized applications. So this was really the slide that I wanted to get to. I've been developing the slides for a number of years, and it's kind of just really there to show a journey going from sort of the traditional heritage data center into some form of cloud platform. So obviously all organizations kind of start from the left, where they have their sort of traditional IT, all these kind of usual platforms and technologies there, everything from sort of mainframes to virtualization to appliances and so on. And then probably about 10 years ago, sort of what I call a transitional IT segment sort of started appearing. That's where you had really a sort of a knee-jerk reaction from IT vendors that started really offering technologies that were designed to accelerate the provisioning of applications and infrastructure. So the likes of hyperconverged infrastructure, on the open source side, you had things like OpenStack as a platform. The likes of VMware offered things like software-defined data center, software-defined infrastructure, and various other types of appliances started appearing. So this was kind of a stopgap, a knee-jerk reaction to the monolithic and traditional way that things were being done in the data center, and IT vendors were looking really to try and accelerate that process. So I call this transitional because for me this is not really a strict definition of cloud or running cloud services on these types of technologies. Cloud is really where you start looking at implementing a cloud native architecture, maybe starting with a sort of an as a service stage where you take advantage of things like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or maybe even SaaS. So for example, if you have a kind of an old or monolithic HR application, it's probably not a good idea to migrate that into the cloud and put that into a sort of an infrastructure as a service. It's probably best to adopt a SaaS solution, something like Workday, for example, and that would be a way to actually migrate into the cloud. So it's not always about actually migrating the application. Sometimes it's just purely the service or the data as well. But that whole space really sort of lasted for only a few years, and then the likes of containerization and orchestration really came in to supersede that, and that's where you had things like Kubernetes and Docker around this sort of the container and orchestration space, whereas really other services continued as they were before. So things like service management was still pretty much the same as you had in the data center, and there wasn't really a huge grip on that in terms of how you'd manage your applications and services in the cloud. Beyond that, we had sort of the next phase, the next stage of cloud, which was really based around DevOps. So this is where organizations really started looking at redeveloping their applications and also changing the entire culture of how you actually write applications for the first time. So far, we've kind of just been moving applications lock stock into the cloud. That was kind of the first phase of that. That was the sort of the infrastructure service. When containers happened, again, organizations started moving their applications, containerizing their applications, and then when that got out of hand, orchestration came in with the likes of Kubernetes to take care of that. But DevOps really represents the first time where organizations can actually rewrite their applications. They can actually redevelop their applications and break up their applications as well. This allows for more lifecycle management of the application. It allows for better security, certainly automation in terms of how those applications are provisioned and scaled. And it also helps with how you configure those applications, and indeed also how you manage those applications. So things like DevSecOps, CI/CD pipelines for actually developing applications, configuration management, as well as things like observability really started coming in as technologies and taking over from sort of the previous stages. And then obviously the ultimate goal is to reach a point in your cloud environment where you're running your workloads in a serverless way. And serverless is really just means that effectively the workloads that you're running are transient. They're not actually fixed to a particular virtual machine or a particular sort of containerized environment that actually developed on the fly and instigated and provisioned on the fly as and when they're needed. And when they're not needed, when the application is no longer required, those workloads are actually taken offline or removed completely. And that obviously means that you can actually save in terms of the costs of running your workloads in the cloud. So things like infrastructure as code, spot instances, taking advantage of things like microservices, which comes out directly from the redevelopment of your applications using DevOps methodologies, all come into play. And what I would call sort of world engines, where you provide a description of the environment that you want to run in the cloud, including all the security, data, workloads, and background services that are needed. And that sort of world engine generates that world for you, generates that environment for you using a description. So we're kind of moving away from sort of a prescriptive environment into a more kind of description of what you want to run, and then that world engine kind of generates that environment for you using serverless technology and infrastructure as code as the base for that description. So that's kind of really shows the sort of the customer journey going from left to right, and the way that the applications kind of move across is one stage at a time, and ultimately the idea is to kind of try and break up those applications into microservices. Okay, so cloud operating model, the fundamentals really is that a cloud operating model is effectively a sort of a blueprint and an architecture that will dictate how the workloads will operate within a cloud environment and an enterprise's cloud environment. And that blueprint is really there to offer sort of the main direction or general direction for all services that will operate within that environment. I've actually written an article for Techorati, which is part of Cloud Expo, on the cloud operating model. So again, if you kind of want more information on that, by all means, do join that and have a look at the links. I think we're going to provide separately as well. Effectively, what the cloud operating model does is to show the distinction between sort of how a static data center works and a dynamic multi-cloud environment actually operates. And it's kind of focused really, if you look at it from an infrastructure point of view, and there are different models and different sort of perspectives of the cloud operating model. But effectively from an infrastructure point of view, the tasks that you want to perform when it comes to actually provisioning, connecting or using a network connection, securing and operating your application is fundamentally different in terms of how that looks in the data center versus how that looks in a cloud environment. So for example, in terms of provisioning in the data center, it's very much sort of homogeneous hardware, dedicated hardware designed really to work for that particular application, for that particular workload. Whereas in the cloud, it's really sort of capacity on demand. So you're more kind of provisioning the actual environment that you need as in when you actually need it. the same thing is really kind of or quite similar in terms of connectivity or networking. In the data center, we're very much used to sort of host-based environments where you have static IP addresses and things like that. In the cloud, it's more service-based. So it's not about the host server that's running a particular application, but it's the service that that application or workload is designed to offer to the environment, to the customer's environment. So dynamic IP addresses, go hand in hand with that. And then what is the application actually offering? What is the workload offering in terms of the service to the business is more important than where that application is residing. What's the design for that? What's the architecture for that? And how's that actually operating? So that's kind of, when it comes to connectivity, that's the most important thing. When it comes to security, we all know that the data center is kind of a very much adopts a sort of a castle mode sort of approach to security. So it's kind of very much a high trust environment. It's account based. Everybody has an account in terms of whether you're an end user of the environment or you're an administrator of the environment or you're indeed an actual application within that environment. Whereas in the cloud, the automatic assumptions that there is no trust. Everything needs to have an identity to actually declare itself to that environment and then be able to actually offer its services to that environment. So really connectivity and security go hand in hand, and those are probably the two most fundamental aspects of the cloud operating model. And those are actually the ones that probably change the most when you migrate from the data center into a multi-cloud environment. And again, when it comes to operation, the data center has kind of dedicated infrastructure, and it's based around a scale-up environment. So if you want to, have more storage, you just upgrade your SAN with more disk drives and things like that. Whereas in the cloud, it's really a kind of a fleet of scheduled resources that you can actually provision on demand when you actually need them, and it's based on a scale-out architecture versus a scale-up architecture. So you're not upgrading more of what you've got; you're actually scaling out more of the same services. So really, the main focus here is the connectivity and it's the security. The difference between a high trust environment to a zero trust environment, a more identity-based, not an account-based environment for security. And in terms of connectivity, we're moving away from host-based systems to service-based systems, where the applications actually declare their identity and security, but also declare what service they're offering, so that all applications that need something can actually request that, make that request for that service, and that service will be offered to them. So an application that may require a database service can actually make that request. They can identify themselves and then make that request for a database, and a service registry will actually offer that database request and allow the application to connect with that backend database. So what is cloud native and how does kind of cloud native fit into all of this? Well, cloud native is really all about kind of services that are delivered using technologies that are and solutions that are obviously born in the cloud. So workloads operate in a seamless way and an intuitive way, and understand how a multi-cloud environment actually works, and operate in a very much a sort of a behavior that is sort of cloud centric. So the idea here is that applications are redeveloped and refactored to take advantage of some of the components that actually change when you migrate to the cloud, as we mentioned earlier with the cloud operating models, security and connectivity, for example. So applications that are sort of built to operate in a cloud infrastructure probably are native citizens, and they're probably kind of cloud first when it comes to operating and being able to work within that cloud environment. And it's really moving away from that sort of old lift and shift of applications from the data center into the cloud. That's the sort of thing that really cloud native tries to avoid. And kind of pictorially, it kind of looks a little bit like this. You've kind of moved away from really a service-oriented architecture or enterprise service buses and kind of how that's, applications used to be sort of developed into a more sort of microservices-based environments where you have kind of, the endpoints are the smart things, and the pipes between don't really have a lot, to invest. And then into more kind of smart platforms, entire platforms that are actually able to think for themselves, communicate for themselves without requirements from an external entity to tell them what to do. And that's kind of really what Cloud Native really offers. So it's kind of all heading towards what's known as a sort of a service mesh, where the microservices operate and communicate with each other at their layer, at their level, and not having to traverse multiple layers down in order to, get a permission or get a connection to something, and traverse all the way up again into their own layer in order to, to perform their task. So the idea is to really remain within that sort of service mesh environment and stay at that same level. So what does that mean in terms of change? Well, obviously people and process changes. So you're kind of moving to a more sort of agile methodology. The roles we change into kind of DevOps and site reliability engineers or SRE roles, and really, offering the teams more autonomy. That's kind of the sort of things that you'd probably expect from a cloud native environment. The architecture and designs, we said, obviously changes. That goes to that sort of operating model, cloud operating model. So you have, more finely grained sort of components. Everything's decoupled, so it can operate independently, as we said. There are minimum states to achieve with the design, and the architecture and the applications are immutable. As we said earlier, it's all about zero trust in that sort of space. And in terms of the technology and infrastructure that you deploy, it has to be elastic, it has to be agnostic, it has to be secure from the first point, and the way that it runs needs to be in a lightweight sort of environment. So again, breaking up the application into microservices means that you can reuse a lot of those microservices elsewhere. Also, a lot of automation goes hand in hand with that sort of environment. So you'd expect that from that type of technology infrastructure. And again, moving away from systems management and service management into observability. That's kind of the operating term, the new term for managing all of these new environments in the cloud. So where can you start with this? Well, probably the best place to start if you're an organization looking to go to the cloud, or maybe you've kind of done a little bit of migration to the cloud, kind of got stuck, or not really sort of understand what the implications are, or perhaps you've kind of tried infrastructure as a service as your sort of first port of call, and that's kind of been sort of relatively successful, but not kind of the brilliant success that you are kind of looking for, and certainly you've not been able to maybe implement an accelerated and agile sort of process to take you through that sort of migration to the cloud. So a good place to start would be the formation of a cloud center of excellence, a CCoE. And CCoE is either a physical or virtual team that will really essentially deliver the strategy and authority for taking the organization into the cloud. The CCoE delivers on all the major decisions are made for that organization. The governance around how cloud platforms will be evaluated, which one will be selected, what partners you want to have to help you on that journey, which proof of concepts you might want to perform, and indeed also an inventory of all the applications that you have, which ones are low-hanging fruits, and how those can actually be migrated into the public cloud as well. So the CCO is really kind of in charge of all of those, setting those standards and the kind of the authority for all the migration programs when it comes to actually moving your workloads into the cloud. And indeed, also it continues that authority by generating a full cloud journey. So it's not just about kind of how you move to the cloud and you can kind of rest there. It's actually about a continuous journey into the cloud and also being able to achieve the milestones that you set out for actually going into the cloud. So again, Google kind of puts up a sort of a success characteristics of the CCoE, and this kind of gives you a quick view of that, and everything from sort of having team members that are from multiple disciplines to empowering that team to make those decisions, to set that strategy, to having that vision, working in an agile way, having the technical ability, whether that's built in-house within the organization and that CCoE team, or actually working in partnership with IT vendors and consultancies, engaging with the business and the stakeholders in order to actually mitigate any risks and issues, being most definitely cloud-centric. I think that probably goes without saying. And also having a integrated hands-on view of how you want to actually look at the workloads that you want to migrate. And it doesn't have to be a huge team. Again, Google kind of says it can be a small team if you are a SME. It can be a virtual team. It doesn't have to be a full-time team that actually focuses on on the CCoE tasks. Okay, so I think that's kind of really hits the end of that. So we've kind of pretty much seen how really the journey for cloud seems to be moving forward. We've kind of seen that sort of left to right move for cloud or for companies looking to migrate to the cloud, and also some of the things that you need to look at in terms of how you implement your cloud strategy. So looking at adopting a cloud operating model, we looked at some of the fundamentals of that, the role that cloud native plays in that cloud operating model, what does it introduce, what are the implications for your IT teams, and also looking at kind of a potential space to start, and obviously various other options available there, but certainly things like Cloud Center of Excellence being one of those areas where you can actually start your journey. Thank you for watching this talk. If you enjoyed the content, please comment, share, like, and subscribe. See you next time.